everybody, and welcome back to another Rise of Myth Cthulhu character video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the most complicated character in the entire game, the Entity. The best way to describe the Entity is to basically say it can nuke things from orbit. When you get into the flows and chains of how you're going to play the cards and the big combos out, you can do eye-watering amounts of damage. The biggest challenge with the Entity is that if you're not that giga-brained and you don't really like long combos or really thinking things through, this class might be a little bit difficult for you to play and get the most out of. You have a very hard early game, as a lot of your power will come a little bit later when you start adding cards and core parts of your combo to your deck. But when you get there, you can just absolutely obliterate things, and it is a ton of fun. And I'll do my best to explain everything as we go through this. So let's get to it and start off with the class relic. The class relic Pleiades lets you begin the game with 12 health and 11 sanity. These are both really healthy pools. That's a lot to work with. In this class, you will get hit quite a bit. You don't have reliable good defense. A lot of the time, you're going to be trying to kill things as quickly as possible and taking a few hits back and just generally trying to not die before the enemies do. So having those healthy pools are quite strong. Also, this class pays a lot in sanity, but I will explain that as we get into the character. This class relic says at the start of your turn, you may spend 1 energy and regain 1 sanity up to 2 times. Flare limit 4. I'll explain flares in just a second, but this is extraordinarily powerful. This is sanity sustain that you don't need to draw, you don't need to find in your deck, and you don't need to balance. At the start of your turn, you can just go ahead and discard a card and gain 2 energy, or 1 energy depending on the cost of the card, and then use that to regain sanity. This will let you stay pretty healthy, but you can probably imagine if this is on the class relic, you spend a lot of sanity in this class. And to really sort of highlight that, let's look at flares. Flares is another unique mechanic for this class. So there are 4 flares. This is the maximum that you can have. They are 0 energy cards, and they do not ever end up inside your deck. What happens is you'll play cards that will generate flares. A flare is a magic attack. It's retainable and it's temporary, so it means that if you don't use it, it stays in your hand. And when it would go to the discard pile, you remove it from the game and you put it back in the flare pile. It's attack 1, and you add attack 1 for each other flare played this turn, and you lose a sanity for playing this. So the dream of it is you play 4 flares in a single turn, and you deal 1, you deal 2, you deal 3, you deal 4. And you can see very quickly how you're paying a lot of sanity to put out tons of damage. The spicier way of using these are to fuel your other effects or your discard effects or some of the other synergies in the deck, as we'll go through all of the cards. But flares can be an amazing source of damage and boss killing cards that you generate through doing other things that you'd be doing anyway. I think the flare build kind of really shines in multiplayer. I find this maybe a little bit hard to do in single player when you can burn your sanity out, but the flares, they are great. They will get the job done in a pinch, and especially early in the game when you want to get that additional damage to clear things out. So with that all explained, let's take a look at what happens if we fall to 5 or lower sanity. This is when we become insane, and in this case, the Entity disables her class item. So the Entity is not actually human in the lore, so I think it's quite fitting that when you're insane, you forget how to use human things. Not that bad when you consider that this doesn't impact a lot of your damage output. There are a couple of good class items that we'll be talking about pretty soon, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to some of the other classes, this is actually not as debilitating as what some of the other insanity modifiers you can get are. We're going to take a look at the basic deck. There are 6 unique cards, and then these are duplicated. So let me just go ahead and flip them over, and we'll do the brand new card first, as that will be the most interesting. Another one of the unique mechanics, as if there wasn't enough of them already with the flares, is replications. And replications, or rather just called replica, lets you replicate a card, and usually there'll be some kind of restriction and there'll be a sanity cost. So this one, Imitation, costs 2 energy to play. When you replicate a card, you take one of these tokens and you place it on the card that you are going to replicate. Each card can only be replicated once, and you cannot replicate a replica. When you do this, this card effect becomes the replicated card. So, for example, if we play Imitation on a Flare, we add Flare's text to Imitation and we resolve that. But we will also still pay the sanity for paying the Imitation, and we'll also still pay the sanity for Flare. But you can start to see that even with that limit of 4, you can start getting to sky-high amounts of damage, depending on how many replicating cards you actually get and put into your deck. Also, in multiplayer, really cool, you can replicate your allies' cards. So this can let you do a lot of things that you normally wouldn't be able to do, and you've kind of got to keep an eye out across the table when planning out your turns. Replicas are very, very strong in this type of game plan, and it will form the core of most of the builds that you want to go for. But I'll talk about that when we get to the card rewards a little bit, as that will add a little bit more context to what I'm trying to explain. The first card we'll take a look at is Optimum Performance. This is a 2 energy skill card that deals 1 damage and you gain an energy. You also inflict a stun, then you discard a card and you draw a card. So there's a lot going on with this. Firstly, we're getting 1 energy back when we play this, so we pay 2, play this, go ahead, deal the damage, gain the energy and put a stun down. That's really, really good for our energy budget on this card, as we're effectively paying 1 energy for 2 damage, because stuns are a bit unique. The way that stun works is when you put it on an enemy, if you're in multiplayer, you can choose what that enemy is going to attack. So you can send it to the person who's playing all the defensive cards. You've got quite a few options. If you're in solo, it's treated as a vulnerability, so the same as one of our green markers, which means the next time you would deal a source of damage to that character, it takes an additional point. So in solo play, this is effectively 2 damage, and you're getting 1 of those energies back, and then you get to discard a card and draw a card, which lets you get through your deck a bit faster when you're trying to set up those big combos. This is a really good card. I'm quite happy to have it in the deck the whole way through. It always discards for 2 energy as well, which is just really, really strong. Across all the characters, at least 2 energy on the discard is really good value. We're going to take a look at one of the defensive cards here, Rejection. Rejection is defense 1, and it puts a stun on 1 enemy specifically targeting you. In solo, that's always going to be any enemy that you choose. It's 1 energy for 1 defense. The cool thing with this is you can kind of push enemies away from you onto your other characters. You do not have good defense in this deck, and you will get beaten up if things keep hitting you. So being able to move that around to characters like the Detective, who has cards like Acrobatics early on in the game, can really help keep you from just getting absolutely bludgeoned before you get all the cards that you need in order for your deck to start functioning. I don't like this card in late game. It's pretty terrible for the energy exchange, so this is a card that you're going to be removing when you get access to shops, or when you start using your progress points and taking some of the fancy upgrades that you have on these cards. So if this is the first video that you're watching, effectively every time you play through the game, you earn progress points as you complete each of the encounters, and then when you play the game through again, you can start taking upgrades from this list. And some of the more powerful ones are removing starter cards from the deck. You can unlock uncommon cards in the shops. That means that your deck is going to start getting better a lot faster. There's a lot of stuff that you can do here, and it adds a lot more replayability to the game. As you get more familiar, you'll start understanding the value of what each of these upgrades are for each character. So Rejection, a card that I'm quite happy to get out of my deck as quickly as possible, but it does have a little bit of value in that early game. Next up, we're going to take a look at Outer Light. Outer Light is a 2 energy magic attack defense card. So this counts as both an attack and a defense for when cards reference attack or defense. This card deals attack 1 and defense 1. If you've played another magic attack card, very specifically, during this turn, you get to add attack 1 or defense 1. So if you've played something else, you can use attack 2 and defense 1. So it's 3 points of stats for 2 energy. A little bit under curve. Again, the magic number is you're looking for 2 points of stats for every energy. So as a starting card, this is a little bit clunky, especially since you have to play something else before you get the value. This is really, really far behind what you want it to be, unless you have already played something else. Now, you could, for example, play this, then replicate it, and you can get yourself defense 2, and then the other one can be attack 2. So there are a couple of tricks, but that would involve paying sanity early, and that can be a little bit tricky, especially in some of the later fights where your sanity pool is very, very relevant. You can use your class relic in order to get that back up, but again, this card's kind of tricky. It for me, in the late stages, if this is in the deck, it's only ever getting discarded for 2 energy. It's very rare that you want to play this outside of the very early game. The flip side to that is Psychonesis. It's a 2 energy magic attack defense card, and you get to choose between putting 2 points between attack and defense. You can also spend an energy to draw 1 card. This can always be played, and you can always choose 2 in the stat that you want. You aren't getting as much value out of this card as what you need to, especially in the later stages of the game. But being able to spend energy to draw a card is pretty good. It gets you through your deck faster, which means you're going to be playing through those uncommon rewards, and if you're getting into Act 2, you're going to start playing those rare rewards more frequently. And even when you're not playing this, it's 2 energy on the discard, which makes it pretty solid to leave in your deck throughout the game. Lastly, we have 1 energy Luminaere. Luminaere is a magic attack that's attack 1. You can spend 1 energy to add a flare to your hand. So this is in your basic kit, how you're going to start getting flares. And remember, we don't discard flares, so over several turns, we can start stacking them up to essentially have a little fireworks display using the enemies as unwilling participants in your explosion tests. This is really interesting because you're effectively spending 2 energy for 2 damage as you get the flare, but you're also losing a sanity if you play the flares. These are best played to stock up on flares for when you want to use for a big turn. It's also just 1 attack for 1 damage, which early on can be acceptable if you need to get yourself a little bit of defense so you don't just get beat up a little bit too much early. But overall, your kit is on the weaker end compared to other characters. And you've got to understand that a big part of that is around how powerful Replica is as a mechanic, as you'll get to play a lot of your cards multiple times when you get 1 reward card and you get to play that twice very early on. Your power comes from your rewards. You scale much harder than all of the other characters in game, especially in damage. This is the highest damage dealing class in the game. And I'm personally more of a fan of the Seer or the Necromancer playing that, but again, when you try and compare side by side the damage output potential, the Entity is king of the pile, I would say. Actually, yeah, you play just as risky as Possessed. Possessed is also very, very strong, but I think Entity squeezes it out, especially once you really get to grips with all the combos. Next up, we're going to take a look at class items. As always, we have 4 different ones, and they are for different ways of playing the character. So let's just flip them over and talk a little bit about them. We'll start off with this one, Stellar Dispersion. Each time you inflict a condition, you may spend 1 energy to change that condition to a different one. So quite a few of our cards in this kit apply stun, and it can be quite useful in single player if you need to get the extra damage, but you can always then use this to turn those conditions into something more useful. That could be weaknesses if you need to prevent damage coming in. This could be prisons if you don't have any more attacks. But it is kind of expensive. Spending an energy to change a condition when you're not gaining an additional condition is extraordinarily expensive. You're not ever getting 2 damage out of a condition, and this isn't even putting a new one on. So this is not one of my favorites. It has its place in some of the interactions, can help you through some of the more challenging encounters specifically, but it's quite niche, and I find this one quite hard to play. Pacifism. At the end of your turn, if you have not dealt damage, you gain defense 4. This is another one that's really hard to play in a class that just wants to put out as much damage as possible, and there are times where you're fighting some of the stronger enemies that will have a lot of defense, and you can effectively choose to just spend a turn stocking up on flares and getting ready for another turn when they are going to have lower defense. But this one's kind of hard to get off because 4 defense is great, but dead enemies don't deal damage, which is basically infinite defense if you think of it that way. So I find Pacifism very, very difficult to play in general. In solo, I want to be killing things. In multiplayer, my team want to be killing things. You're probably triggering this only a handful of times in a run, and it never feels good doing it because it just feels like I'm not doing what I want the class to do. So I'm not a fan of Pacifism. Solar Aura. Your flares gain +1 blue flame. So this means when you discard the flares, you get +1 energy. And the flares are 0 energy cards, so they usually don't discard for energy. So this lets you turn them into energy that you can spend on different turns. So if you don't want to spend all that sanity, you can convert it into energy, which is great, unless you're playing the card that costs an energy to get the flare, in which case you are just effectively banking energy into a future turn. But the other cool thing for Solar Aura is the first flare you play during your turn does not cause you to lose sanity. Across the whole course of a game, this can actually save you a lot in sanity. So very, very strong class item, very big fan of this one, especially in multiplayer where flares really get a chance to shine when you've got other players that can be helping out and helping you set it up. Probably the most powerful one is the Shapeshifter. This is a class item that says your replicas add attack 1 or defense 1. So you're just getting extra point of stat on your replica. So if you're replicating a relatively strong card, like an uncommon or a common card, that has the effect that you want, you're gaining additional stats from it, which is just great. Especially when you see this, you're going to be building quite heavily into replicas. I think in almost any successful entity strategy, you are going to be using replicas in some capacity. The class items are not as strong as they are in some of the other characters, but again, that just then makes this insanity debuff less punishing when you effectively say, oh, I just don't get to use my class items, which were not as impactful as my reward cards. You can even get out of the insane modifier by just discarding cards and then regaining sanity using your class relic. So they're fine. Solar Aura is good and Shapeshifter is great. I think both of those are really fun. But yeah, this character is less dependent on their class item compared to some of the other characters. Now, let's get to the fun part. Let's start talking about some of the reward cards. We'll start off with Free from the Common pile. The first card we're going to look at is Forcing the Issue. Forcing the Issue is a 1 energy skill that discards for -1 blue flame. So this means if you discard it, you'll get 0 energy. So don't do that. Just don't. Don't troll the team. This skill says draw 2 cards. And that might feel a little bit underwhelming until you remember you can replicate this. So all of a sudden, you are playing this, drawing 2 new cards. That's going to be giving you energy. You're going to be playing a replicate card on this. You're going to be drawing another 2 cards, and you're going to be able to get through the deck very, very quickly, which means you're going to be playing your more powerful reward cards more frequently. So this can let you draw out of bad hands very, very quickly and prevent you from having to play cards that you just don't want to play. Forcing the Issue is probably one of the most important common reward cards in the entire pool. I would be aggressively spending my coins or sanity. This is a character you can quite comfortably spend sanity on because you can use your ability to regain it, and look for these cards as they're going to form the core of what you're going to be able to do. And remember, if you're getting through your deck and you have access to more cards, that's more energy, that's more playing cards that you want to play. Forcing the Issue, always take these. These are great. If you're more on the flare end, you can go for Upping the Ante. This is a 1 energy skill that adds 2 flares to your hand. Very, very simple. Again, you can replicate this and then you have all 4 flares. That's a lot of damage. You can then just trade your 4 sanity for a firework display, and that will deal with most things, especially in the early game. Very, very strong card. The issue with that is it is quite intense on sanity, especially early, because then you end up over-relying on your class item to give you your sanity back. But if you have access to the class item that lets you play your flares for your first flare for 1 less sanity, this can be quite powerful. And like I said, you can also replicate this to add those flares, and that gives you a lot of options through future turns. It's a great card, especially in multiplayer. And then we take a look at a reward replica card, High Conversion. It's a 3 energy card that discards for 1 less energy, so you discard it, it only discards for 2. You get to replicate up to 2 lower cost cards and only up to common rarity. So we could play this, copy both of these, we lose a sanity, draw an extra 2 cards, add an extra 2 flares. So now our hand has 4 flares, 4 cards, and we've played High Conversion. That feels pretty strong, and this is just like a start of all the sort of combos that you can start doing with this. There's a ton of rewards in here, and they're all kind of fun, and they can get a little bit kooky when you start using replica on them. And you can also replica your allied cards as well, so that can also result in you doing some pretty incredible things. Overall, very, very strong common pool, and as you can see if you've watched some of our other videos, this character scales very, very quickly when you start getting the reward cards. Huge, 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 huge fan of this. Next up, we're going to get to the uncommon cards. And let's just go ahead and flip these over. We're going to take a look at Self-Assessment. Self-Assessment is a 2 energy melee attack defense card. Important, it's not a magic attack for the cards in our base deck that do care about that. If you are wounded, you gain defense 7. If you're not wounded, you gain attack 7, and you lose a sanity for playing this. Attack 7 for 2 energy is absolutely bonkers. And you can replicate this. And when you do play a replica card on this, you can get 14 attack across 2 cards, and that will cost you 2 sanity, depending on which kind of replicating card you've got to use. And it's also worth noting that a lot of the lower reward tier replica cards can't replicate something of a higher rarity. Yeah, this will stop you replicating your rare cards and doing some really, really crazy stuff. But being able to deal 14 damage in a single turn will obliterate most of the creatures, actually, up to quite a high tier. And even if that doesn't finish them, your teammates will certainly have more than enough in the tank to deal with them. This is a really, really great card, and one that you want to get for your deck to draw as many times as possible. And if you're very low on health, it does just become defense 7. Preferably you want to be playing this for its attack though, as remember, if all the enemies are dead, you have infinite defense. Great, great card. Now we're going to start going off the deep end if you're Johnny the Combo player. This 2 energy chain replica is a replica card that lets you replicate the same card up to 3 times, providing it's of equal or lower cost and only up to common rarity. You lose 1 sanity per replication. So if we want to force the issue, we can draw 6 cards and lose 3 sanity. That's an entire turn ahead of all of your allies or ahead of where you should be in the game. That's absolutely absurd. Or if you've got, for example, a flare, you could replicate the flares. I'd probably recommend not doing that, as you would pay the cost of sanity on the flares and you'd also pay the cost of sanity on this card. But you can start to see how quickly your damage starts mounting up or what your combos can allow you to do. Chain Replica is an excellent card and it fits into basically every strategy. You just have to make sure that you are very good at managing your sanity and using your class relic to regain that, and your shop encounters, maybe you're going to be forced to buy a little bit of sanity back. Lastly, we're going to take a look at Full Load. This is a 2 energy skill that when you play it, you add a flare to your hand, then you get to choose a card from your discard pile and add it to your hand. Then you regain 2 sanity. A great card to have back with this, Forcing the Issue. Get 2 sanity back, draw 2 cards, get a flare, replicate this, get back another card, gain 2 sanity, get a flare. It's just lets you play your best cards over and over again. And remember, any card that you play, you can replicate once. So this can effectively give you like your best cards, and it's any card at any rarity. So it's going to add your rare back. It can give you additional copies of those cards, and then you're replicating them. So you're going to be playing your better cards way more than any other class in the game. Full Load, kind of busted when you think about it, actually. This card is just so good. And lastly, we're going to come to our rare cards. These are the most powerful cards that you will get for this class. You get one after beating the Great Old One, and then you get a couple in Act 2, but they are quite hard to come by, and that just tells you how difficult the game gets. So let's take a look. First, we'll look at Perfect Cycle. Perfect Cycle is a 1 energy magic attack, attack 4. You can spend 1 energy to add a replica card from your discard pile back to your hand, and you may play this replica card at 0 cost. So 2 energy, you get attack 4, you get a card back, a replica, and you get to play that card for 0, which can then copy this card, which can then deal another 4 damage, and then can spend another extra energy to add a different replica card from your discard pile back to your hand, and you get to play that at 0 cost. It's kind of absurd, actually, and being able to use some of your cards like Full Load to get this back will allow you to put together really big chain turns and start really piling the damage on to some of the Great Old Ones. Very strong card, especially if you've gone through and picked up quite a few of the replica cards. Recycling is probably one of my favorite cards in the entire game because it's so unique. It's a 0 energy skill that discards for +1 energy, but if you discard this card, something is going horribly, horribly wrong. This card lets you add up to 3 cards you've discarded this round to gain energy back to your hand. So you could discard 3 cards to gain 6 energy, play this, add those cards back to your hand, discard them for 6 energy, or just play them. So you can use cards to pay for themselves, and you can also replicate this as well. So that will then let you add another 3 cards back so that you can continue going. And then you can use full load, put this back in your hand, and then you effectively, if you start replicating your draw cards and you start playing this repeatedly, you're going to be able to then keep enough energy to play all of those extra cards that you draw. It's quite feasible to be able to get through your entire deck basically every 2 turns, or every 1.5 turns you've played everything, and then you play all of it again. It's super, super powerful. This is a great card. You'll have to consider, because I think all of the rare cards are pretty impressive. This just happens to be one of my favorite ones because it's so unique. A very, very powerful card and a great addition to your deck. And lastly, we're going to take a look at a defensive card, because we haven't actually talked too much about defense in this character, as we've been damage, damage, damage. Energy Aura is 1 energy. You can discard it for 2 energy because of the 1 blue flame. It's retainable, so it means that we don't discard it at the end of turn. We can just hold on to it. The defense is equal to the amount of energy you've gained this turn. So if you've just gone ahead and gained 20 energy through various draw combos and putting stuff down and then replicating them and picking cards back up, you'd be able to then gain a bunch of defense, which is great for those really, really big turns where you're against the boss, as you can just basically hold it until you need it. It's strong. Admittedly, again, you're going to be focusing mostly on offense, but this lets you do both, because you can then just spend your whole turn attacking, gaining a bunch of energy, and then you can just play this and go, cool, I've got defense and I didn't really have to commit to that side of things. And then, of course, you can just replicate this and then gain even more defense, which makes it probably not getting hurt that turn. Of all the turns you're going to take damage, it's probably not that turn. Last but not least, we're going to talk about a special card, and this card you get when you complete the game on Nightmare mode and you decide you want to start increasing the difficulty and fighting new challenges. Once you've done that, you can add this card to your collection. This is another class relic which you can choose to use. It gives you more health. Well, actually, we start with the same amount of health. We get 12, but we get more sanity. We get an extra 2 points there. The start here. At the start of your turn, you may spend 1 energy to regain 2 sanity. So rather than 1 energy per sanity, we just get 2 sanity back for 1 energy. And then we have a flare limit of 4. Very, very powerful, especially when you start homebrewing some of the rules of some of the difficulties. There's suggestions in the rulebook for some of the ways you can make the game harder, and this is the kind of class relic that will help offset that. Overall, that has been a run into the entity of some of the strategies. I have barely scratched the surface of all the ways that this character can do utterly, utterly crazy things and impress the whole table, or drive all of your friends mad as you take the longest turns imaginable. If you're a time traveler and you've got your copy of the game and you want to give some advice to some new players who have just picked it up, please put down below some of the best replication turns that you've had, talk about some of the combos, help the other players out. We also always love to hear your feedback, so please feel free to get in touch, leave us some comments down below, hit that subscribe button, and keep up with us so you can watch more great content and enjoy some of the games coming out from the studio. For now, I'm going to sign it off here, but thank you so much for watching. It's been a real pleasure. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.